I'm a real advocate for action learning. I'm just trying to finish off a master's at the moment. I'm actually looking at the ways of developing partnerships through an action learning cycle. I like it because it's simple, and I like it. I'm a visual learner as well as sort of, you know, I need to touch and feel, and I'm a flight learner. I love it. This is a really good way of planning, and also for your young people working in a learning environment. And I'm going to get to a point by the end of this session of showing you the planning way of doing things that actually connects to an action learning. It's very simple. We know, I suppose instinctively, that the best way to improve the way we teach and the best way for young people to learn and for us to learn is to reflect. Because through reflection and discussion, collegiate discussions, you actually get new ideas, better ideas. You can consolidate, you can be affirmed that what you're doing is right. That's reflection. So in an action learning cycle, you actually give yourself the time, you give your colleagues the time, and you also give students the time, because this is what they can learn about. To think about what needs to be done, to plan carefully about what needs to be done. And that's about setting the goals and expectations and the outcomes. You all work to learning outcomes. You all work to educational curriculum frameworks. You plan towards that. It's about the action, and then what comes out of the action, the questions that you learn, you ask yourself as the actions are happening, the doing, and then you're giving you time to reflect. And as you know, reflection and planning, the more time that goes into that, the better the outcomes. And we know that even in our own personal lives, if we plan something well, it's fantastic. Spontaneity is brilliant, and we know that we can always pull that out of our teacher's toolbox. You know, the things that we can do. However, really to reach the outcomes we want, whether it's behavioural issues, whether it's learning issues, whether it's community-based issues, the planning and reflection are very clear. And it is a cycle. There's necessarily no start point and end point. It continually moves. And sometimes you go off on a tangent, and that's fantastic when you do, because it means that you've actually taken that step to the next level. So a couple of big questions that we're going to sort of just keep touching on as we go through today. So how might we actually honour young people's life worlds through learning, and to develop active, engaged learning behaviours? It's about changing behaviours. You know, as I said, we can't control their outside life worlds, but the best way for us to help control their learning world is to plan carefully, to think about it in a reflective way, and to come up with tools that can actually connect them to their outside world, so we understand what's going on in their life and how it impacts on their learning world. Now, the biggest thing for me, and this is when I was developing this with Gavin, is, and he opened my eyes to the whole idea of understanding my educational perspective. And that's what we're going to tackle in a minute. The impact that our individual and educational perspectives and contexts have on the way that we actually work with young people as well. And then how that influences the way that we teach and we plan, we influence what we try to do. Now, this is very quickly, the Teachers as Architects model is look, it's a long course, but it's actually fantastic, and it does take you to another level of working. 4 sections: building a context for learning, conditions for learning, building teaching for learning, and designing for learning. As I said, I'm going to take 2 tiny aspects out of that today. So I'm going to ask you a question. I want to understand from you why you think society sets up educational institutions. This is the context for learning. If we can get down, this is a question I actually never asked myself. Only about 10, 12 months ago. Why do we actually set up educational institutions? I'm not going to have any thinking time, talking time. Can you just throw out some suggestions about why we do what we do? We set up institutions to learn. Why?
To grow the future.
To grow the future.
Yeah, groom
the future. Yep. Okay. What else? Yep. Sorry? Some support. Yep. What else?
Provide equal access.
Child-minded. Sorry, what was that?
To provide equal access to knowledge.
Okay, equal access to knowledge. Okay, thinking, yeah. What else? Anything else? Everyone has equal access. Yep. Any other reasons? Yeah.
Create conformity.
Yes. Fantastic. Anything else?
Interaction.
Sorry?
Social interaction.
Social interaction. Okay, now we're getting at the more philosophical and the community of the social aspects. When educational institutes have been around for years and years, there was reasons why, and I think we've evolved in time, but we also know that we've evolved the reasons why we still have educational institutes and the way that we think about these things. So it's a really important thing to ask, and you'll probably think about this a little bit more over the next few weeks about why we actually do what we do. This is what researchers actually said. Typically responses are in 4 areas. Educational institutions are about to carry the cultural heritage of society and its inherent values. Okay, so think about that one. Produce numerate people who therefore have a greater chance to contribute to the evolution of society. This is big picture thinking. To produce literate people who therefore have a greater chance to contribute to the evolution of society. And finally, to produce people with the social capacity. We always keep talking about social capacity. Well, it's what education actually does. Now, for me, this really rings true in the way that, if I talk about big picture things, how many people have heard about the Melbourne Declaration about educational goals for young people? Okay. For me, that really is disappointing. The Melbourne Declaration of Educational Goals for Young People is actually I suppose, a big national vision for the way that young people need to learn, be educated. It, unfortunately, through communication channels, never gets out anywhere. 2 years ago, I worked on, I suppose, the big picture thinking. I suppose the community between all the states and governments and the ministers who developed this. And what it is actually a big vision of where they want Australia to go in relation to education and young people. It is dynamic. And what it is, and I've just written the second goal up there, but it's about proving educational outcomes for all young people is central to the nation's social and economic prosperity. There's 2 key goals. The first one is Australian schooling promotes equity and excellence. I don't think anyone would actually disagree with that. So I think that's a really very clear, straight goal. The second goal is what I love and I embrace, and I think as VCAL practitioners we also need to embrace it. And it needs to be the vision of what we do moving forward, but it also needs to be part of the lexicon or the context of our education understanding. It is these 3 things. All young Australians become successful learners, confident creative individuals, and active and informed citizens. Now we've got why we set up educational institutions talking about the social value and developing, our community and our society and our country. And we have actually this declaration of where they want young Australians to go. We fit into that picture. This is where we actually need to start thinking and getting these messages out. Now, in your handout, the first one, this is the handout I'm referring to, we're going to do a little quick activity. On the second page is what we're calling educational beliefs. I love this. This is the sort of stuff I like to spend more time in. I would spend a couple of hours with you on this instead of 2 minutes. But it's very much about, these are, I suppose, the context for learning. This is in some respects where people come from. Now, I did say about 10 minutes ago, we all come with a way of working and understanding education. If you think about it, we have individual context for education. We have then peer group context for education. Often, people who work in the same area have very similar contextual beliefs about education. Then we have institutional context for understanding work. All our schools are different. I work in a region that is reasonably conservative in relation to applied learning. It's very much competing academic, and it won't actually often allow very much of applied learning and vocational education into our region. Some regions embrace it, and it's fantastic. But again, it's basically the understanding of the context of the education, where everyone sits. So what we've got here are 6, just have to count them then, ways of understanding education. And you will probably all align yourselves pretty similarly. But when I've actually done this and talked to lots of different schools and lots of different professionals in education, I tell you what, it's amazing how many people, and you can probably think about some of the people who work in your facilities or your schools who would sit in different areas. So we have an academic rationalist view. The major function of school curriculum is to enhance, I should actually put a voice on because I was sort of almost, saying it's wrong. Individuals' intellectual abilities in those subjects areas most worthy of study. I think we've heard that before from some people. The next one is the cognitive processor. The school and education is about providing students with the necessary skills or processes to help them learn how to learn. The next one is the humanistic view. The curriculum should provide opportunities to enhance the individual's self-concept in order to achieve self-actualization. I love that one. Social reconstructionist. The curriculum should affect social reform and help produce a better society for all. The technologism, I hate that word, systems view. The curriculum should determine the most efficient means, use of technology to achieve what was stated as being desired. And the last one is the eclectic view. This is me, in some respects. The curriculum should provide the students with opportunities for 2 or more of the above beliefs. And I think it should be more, because we have to cater for every young person. If you think about it, this is what I want you to think about it. You will probably align yourself a little bit to one, but we're all not the same. So if you think about it, you work in an organisation, you work with a peer group, you work in a sector or a community of schools or learning facilities, you work within a region, you work within a state, you work within a country. We all have different views and contexts of education. We wonder why sometimes we are misaligning the way that we do work when it comes to on the ground, because we often forget to understand the way that people come with the context of what education is about. So I'm going to leave it there. So you can probably think about some of your colleagues and where they sit. Think about where you may have sit in the past and where you've actually moved to. So as teachers and facilitators responsible for the planning and implementation of curriculum, isn't it important to contextualise learning beliefs? I'm just going to say a few things for thinking. Yeah. Belief systems, and this is part of this, is within this building block, encourage educators to examine their own beliefs and the roles complained with interactions with others, the development of their programs and the opportunities to change. This is how it all fits together. This helps us honour and understand the life worlds of the young people we work with, and also help them understand us a bit. If we develop a deeper understanding of the different beliefs about learning and teaching and education context, we might be able to actually help make more informed decisions about how we do what we do, why we do what we do, when we do it, who we do it with, what we learn. And then we can actually work towards something that actually aligns these experiences and expectations of young people. Because if you think about it, all young people are often moulded by the expectations, educational expectations and context of their parents. That's where they begin. Not many have their own individual way of going, I refuse to go to a private school because I have a public, it's not many of those kids who sort of, or I want to go to an academic school and you have a parent who might actually want their kid to go to Stein. There's different ways of actually working. Very much where kids are moulded by what their parents' expectations and contexts are. We may better understand our students and parents' view of learning, and I think that's very much parents and guardians we need to work with more closely. We need to understand where they're coming from, because that again helps us mould the attitudes and the behaviours of young people. And then we move on to really, how this works together. Our students, teacher and work is what we hear about today. Everything we talk about is about how we relate to students, how students relate to students, how together we relate to the work that we need to produce. That's what education is about. So in some ways it's a little point considering teaching without understanding learning. And we do know, and I think one of the things I was talking to a colleague the other day about is that so much we think about learning styles, and I've been to so many seminars about learning styles, and that's really, really important. We have to, individual learning plans, individual styles, but actually understanding how we learn and how we understand education, I think really, we pretty much to the party, we can go a long way. So we are all examples of successful learners. Now, we're now going to move on to conditions of learning. And this is really interesting as well. This is not just about, I suppose, making everything comfortable for young people and making sure they've got the right resources. There are lots of different conditions that we actually need to honour and take into account when we're working with young people. So, just want you to spend 30 seconds having a quick discussion at your table about what you think are some of the key conditions that young people, or we need to actually bring to the table with young people that are going to help us in our education and learning.